And now it's my pleasure to introduce Jana Grauberger.
Welcome, welcome, welcome everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are located. I am thrilled to welcome you to this Women's Energy Network national program, Courageous Conversations, Fostering Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in your organization. We could go to the next slide. Here's a look at our 2020 National Board of Directors. I want to thank all of these women who have done an extraordinary job and really kept things going and been willing to be flexible and do a lot of new things during this challenging year. So thank you to the WIN National Board of Directors. Our next slide is an additional thank you. We always want to thank our sponsors. These are our national sponsors for 2020. We thank Deloitte, Hunt Oil Company, Opportune, Shell, and Vinson and Elkins. Never, ever has it been more clear than this year, both at the national and at the chapter level, the importance of the support of our sponsors. And so we really appreciate these companies for sponsoring WIN. We think it brings great benefits to your organization, and we couldn't do what we do without your support. So thank you very much. Next slide. So what has the Women's Energy Network been up to this year? Well, I'm sure you've noticed a lot of things at your chapter level. At the national level, we've been busy as well, but one thing we've been really busy with is we've really doubled down in our efforts regarding DEI initiatives. And we've done this both internally within WIN and also externally. So we formed a racial equality in the workforce task force this summer. Those ladies have been doing a fantastic job. They've just done so many things, some of which are covered on this slide. And it began with adopting a DEI statement for WIN. We've also made changes to our bylaws to ensure that on our boards, on our committees, on our advisory council, that we are diverse, that we are especially paying attention to including women of color in roles throughout our whole organization and in our membership as well. We will, and it'll be talked about a little bit later in this program towards the end, but we are currently searching for a WIN DEI director who will be a board member that will further these efforts in 2021 and beyond. So be on the lookout for that. And this program really came out of the task force efforts. This is something that they were working on to have kind of a big, nice national kickoff program, and this is it. I also want to give a very quick thank you to the WIN Boston chapter, who displayed what we've seen a lot of this year in a really exciting way. And that's one WIN chapter having an idea, but instead of keeping it, sharing it in a way that it could have a bigger impact on people in the Women's Energy Network from across the country. So thanks, WIN Boston, for coming up with a great idea and for sharing it so that we could put together this great panel today. Next slide. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our National Program Director, Cara Byrne. Cara?
Thank you, Jana. As Jana was saying, we as the Racial Task Force are very excited to bring this inaugural Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion panel to you. I've had the pleasure of working with not only the task force, but with these speakers over the last few weeks, and I think it's going to be an amazing and a very courageous and timely conversation for us all to take part in. So at this time, I would really love for the panelists to start turning on their cameras and on their microphones so that way I can introduce Deanna Jones. Deanna Jones is the Chief Human Resource Officer from Baker Hughes. She's been in the company since January of 2020, and she is here as our moderator today to lead a conversation with Lori Freeman, Nichelle McLemore, and Nichelle Grant. So we've got two Nichelles, a Lori and a Deanna, and I'm going to go ahead and let them take over the conversation. So with that, Deanna, the show's all yours.
Awesome. Thanks, Cara. I really appreciate it. We have a great conversation about to occur today. I think the tagline was an incredible group of fierce ladies. And I can attest to that after our prep sessions. We could probably talk all day on this topic. So there'll be no shortage of insights and perspectives coming from this group. So as Cara mentioned, I'm the CHRO for Baker Hughes. I've been there since January. We have a big commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as you would expect from a global company. But I think that the big thing to highlight for Baker Hughes is that in 2019, as part of our refresh on our strategy and our brand, the team took a look at foundational elements across the entirety of that portfolio and really re-engaged the employee resource groups. And there's a huge commitment and tone at the top from our board and our CEO. So in this moment, I would say that that's the big change or emphasis. And with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to allow each of the ladies to introduce themselves. So maybe we'll start with Nichelle Grant, who is up at the top left-hand corner of my screen right now. So we'll start there and go clockwise, I guess.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for having me today. Can you hear me okay? I just want to make sure.
Yes, we can.
Okay, excellent. Well, like she said, my name is Nichelle Grant. I am the head of diversity, equity, inclusion for Siemens in the U.S., and I'm happy to be here. Siemens is U.S. Siemens is a subsidiary of Siemens AG, which is a global powerhouse. And if you're not familiar with Siemens, we really focus on transforming the industry, whether that's power generation and distribution, or whether that's intelligent infrastructure for the buildings that we work in, or distributed energy systems and automation and digitalization for manufacturing processes. It's really exciting how innovative a company that we are. We've been doing diversity, equity, inclusion for many years, and I'm excited today to have a discussion with my colleagues about the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our focus is really around the workforce, the workplace, and the marketplace. And that workforce is really important in terms of really leveraging the diverse attributes that they bring, the marketplace with our customers and our partnerships and our suppliers, and then that workplace, that culture that we want to build, that inclusive culture that we want to build. So I look forward to the discussion. Thanks again for having me.
Awesome. Lori, let's move to you.
Sure. My name's Lori Freeman. I've worked for Shell for 28 years. And to be honest, I am very thankful and honored to be able to have this conversation. In fact, I have like the chills just thinking about the fact that we're sitting here today in 2020 and how different the world has changed since when I started 28 years ago. So I do want to speak to a couple things. So I work for Rolled at Shell, and the really incredible story here is that Gretchen Watkins is our female Shell US country chair, and she's just phenomenal. And so not only at a Royal Dutch level, but within Shell US, Shell's really taken the steps to make a step change difference. Many of you may have seen in the sustainability report for Shell that our CEO, Ben Van Beerden, is on the CEO members for the Catalyst for Change, for Catalyst. And a lot of you may also know that we've been very fortunate in Shell to really have taken the events of the recent past and take it to a very fundamental and deeper level. And Gretchen Watkins, who's our country chair and our president for the US, has really led the change and the change effort, as well as all of the folks in our organization. Things like driving mentorships and sponsorships, which are different, thinking through exactly what courage does it take and what do we expect of our leaders, right? If we see something that doesn't feel right. She has just been phenomenal in leading the change that we need to make. So I look forward to this panel.
Awesome. And Nichelle.
Hello, yes, the two Nichelles. I'm the second Nichelle today, which is exciting. I am really excited to participate in this session. I, for one, firmly believe that especially around these tough issues, conversation is a good thing, right? It makes us all better. We're all able to learn from each other. So I'm very excited to participate. I'm a managing director with Deloitte in our energy resources and industrials practice. I've been with Deloitte for 16 years. And done varied roles over that time. One of them, what primarily takes up my time these days is two things. One, I'm a managing director, as I said, and a client relationship executive. And then secondarily, I've just recently been asked to co-lead our energy resources and industrials diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts globally. So those are two important things, and certainly from a DEI perspective, I'm very passionate to align kind of what I'm doing in my role along with my personal passions. And what I'd say about Deloitte, like other companies, I mean, no company is perfect, but Deloitte, since I've been with Deloitte, has had a focus and an emphasis on diversity and inclusion. And where I've seen that evolve lately is, especially I would say a couple years ago, there was an incident with Botham Jean, who actually worked for one of our competitor organizations, but that started really the first conversation around race. So as this conversation thinks about racial equity and racial issues, that really brought into focus issues around race and kicked off a series of integrated leadership experiences where all of our leaders were required to kind of take a session and start thinking through conscious and unconscious bias. And that's continued on, and Deloitte's certainly making strides. There have been more efforts as of late, and I can share a bit more around that, the specifics around what we're doing. We're also part of the CEO, the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, which is an organization that's trying to impact societal diversity and inclusion, and not just within our company. So those are a few things. I'm excited to learn from these ladies and talk with you today.
Awesome. So we had talked about the fact that the ladies are very good, as I said, conversationally. You know, there's no shortage of great insights and perspectives that they have. And so we're going to jump into some questions. They're going to fluidly talk through and just build off of each other. And so we'll just get things rolling, and I'll kick off with the first question is really, let's talk about, you know, it's been a tough year for energy. Across the entire spectrum. I mean, it's been a tough year for everyone, but, you know, energy has been uniquely challenged. Energy, you know, all of us have long histories in our companies and in the industry. And we have not always probably been, you know, the example of an industry that is highly diverse and has a lot of inclusion in terms of perspectives. So let's talk about the current state a little bit, and then you've already shared a few things, but if you can expound on what's different in this moment, and what do you see your company doing differently, and what do you think it's going to take in this moment to really move the needle and change the way that things have always been done?
Yeah, I'll start. You know, over the summer, we saw all walks of life really kind of come together to support the change that we wanted to see after the killings of George Floyd and those before him. And really what we wanted to do as an organization is really take leadership. And our leadership team at Siemens took a clear stance, right, that we fully support and advance racial equality and equity. And we will not tolerate discrimination or even condone violence. And so what we really realized, to what Nichelle said, was that we had to have the conversation. So you may have heard courageous conversations, but we had our own version of courageous conversations. And I think when we look at it from an energy industry perspective, we really need to start looking at it from what is that workforce that we're promoting? Because when we take a look at how we're promoting people or developing people and finding the right skill sets, we have a lot of work to do. As our CEO, Barbara Humpton, who's phenomenal, she really has this great philosophy about encouraging her team to have a work-life blend, right? Some kind of balance. and really making sure that we have a good balance between the two. Well, when you look at the barriers within the energy industry and where that takes us, it really allows us to open up the aperture, if you will, of the possibilities. And so this change with COVID-19, as well as the racial unrest, it has opened up the doors. So even though this year's been challenging, we really realize that we really have to start hiring for the future, right? What we would call the fourth industrial revolution, that 21st century workforce, looking for workers that can really run and maintain America's infrastructure. And DEI plays a critical part in that. We really need that skill gap across all diverse attributes, all those different openings. And when we take a look at the talent that we're looking for and how we view it, we really have to open up our mindset and have a broader understanding of people's skill sets and not be pigeoned into one particular thought, such as you have to have a 4-year degree or you have to have some type of community college education, or there's technical training that you may need. And so although those things are important, there may be other avenues to get to the same skill set. And so we want to make sure that we're looking at that. So I would say that, the bigger picture of this for us was really considering, man, look at all those different energy type jobs out there, or manufacturing type jobs. If we could think about this differently, imagine the dent we can make in filling those jobs and moving forward. So I think this, although it's been a tough year, I think it's opened up doors and new ways of thinking, which we need to ride that wave all the way through so that we can see impact and change.
So I'll chime in. I think one of the things that's really important about now is intentionality, right? Like, we have to deliberately do something. I think so many things are driving that, right? So it's the supply issues within the industry, it's the demand issues caused by COVID, it's the energy transition and climate change. All of those things are coming together. And we need good, bright people with a lot of different ideas affecting on every part of society to make this work. And if we aren't, as an industry, connecting with everybody, bringing everyone into that conversation, having everyone be an active part of that solution, we're probably losing out. And I mean, you could argue we might not even make it, right? So, I mean, that's, the world according to Nichelle. But I think that's I think that is what we're kind of getting at. I think that's why organizations like WIN exist, because we're looking for ways of including everyone in the conversation to have a voice. And so I think that's an important part of what energy companies are going through right now. As for Deloitte, it's one of the many industries that we serve, obviously. And so there are various things that we're trying to do. I would say that even within Deloitte, kind of the DEI efforts that move forward first at a very industry level, we have a bigger presence in some other areas, frankly. So it's a thing that we're trying to catch up and do better. And we do have some representation, right? But again, being intentional about it, as our CEO recently said, we all have a revenue plan. We're going to run and we're going to go get it. And we're going to cheer and throw a party if we make it. But that sets a goal, and that sets where we're headed. So I think that's, kind of the whole industry is thinking about that. And I say that as, individual companies, but then all of us collectively. Specifically what Deloitte is doing, so we kicked off a Black Action Council after the events of this summer that we all know about and Nichelle mentioned as well. And the Black Action Council is focused on 6 key areas. There's the experience for the people in the organization, for the Black people in the organization. There's equity and representation, kind of the diversity of the people that we see and the roles that they play. There's allyship. It's a lot of, how do you do that? What does that mean? What do you say? What do you not say? I want to be a part of that. What does that mean? And we have to provide a way to help people do that. Business impact, and that is taking a bold stance in the marketplace with our clients, our customers, and our communities. That's also social impact on society, and then also accountability. And that is in being transparent within our organization about our goals and where we're going.
And if it's okay, I would like to add in. So I'm thinking through at Shell, right? Our goal is to be the employer of choice, and we're just committed to supporting equity in the design and the execution of all of our systems. And just thinking through that our workforce really needs to reflect the communities within which we work, and then hold ourselves, our leaders, our staff accountable for developing and progressing Black and other people of color, as well as all genders, to really help folks step in and feel really included and respected. So that is kind of the direction absolutely we're headed. And we have a USDEI plan that includes all of the things both Nichelles have both talked about. I do want to like lift the hood a little bit if you're thinking I'm an engineer, so thinking like an engine, like a car. And just tell you on a personal basis, in the last few months, to Nichelle's point, the silver lining for me, and the silver lining I think that folks are seeing, is that we are having, and I'll say I am having, deeper conversations. And quite frankly, the conversations are uncomfortable at times. And I'm like just thinking to myself, I'm being encouraged here to tell you this, but in my past, my work life and my home life have been separate. And considering I'm sitting in my children's game room right now, you know, with treats from my dog right here, right? And trying to keep everybody quiet and sane as we do this conversation. The combination of the work and the home life have really made me personally grow into one person, and really forced the tough conversations at home, which, to be honest, has given me the courage to have some of those tougher conversations at the office. And I'm just kind of lifting the hood a little, but in Shell, our leaders have really encouraged this. And in fact, we've enrolled our employee resource groups, ERGs. Sorry if I run into acronym land, so I'll try to spell everything out. But we've asked our ERGs to hold these really tough conversation, courageous conversations. We had a breaking the silence conversation phase 2 today, and really give folks the space to ask questions. And I'll tell you, me personally, my blind spot has been, I thought I knew things, and I actually don't. Like, I know nothing. Like, there's so many things in the space after 28 years of Shell and raising 3 children, there's so much I don't know. And so just to kind of be vulnerable for y'all, I think this is the silver lining. It's uncovering something personal and helping bring that to the workplace so that I can help other folks out. I hope that's kind of directionally what you wanted, Tiana.
No, that's great. And the conversation, so I was reflecting a little bit, yesterday, Lorenzo Simonelli, who is the CEO of Baker Hughes, and I were on a call with our African-American employee resource group, and covering, sort of what do they think that, we need to be doing in this moment? What does it look like? How could we be more powerful? And we started off the conversation, and everyone was being really nice and really positive. Baker Hughes has done this, and Lorenzo, you've been great this way. And he, very nicely put his hand up, and said, okay, that's enough of the nice. Let's get to the meat of what you really want to say, but you're afraid I'm going to be upset, or that Deanna's going to, take it the wrong way. And let's have a real conversation about where we're falling short, and what are some of the things where we could be more aggressive, or, that we really need to change the way that we've thought about this, or what we could do. And so I think that the listeners would really love to hear, how do you get into those courageous conversations? And, one of the ladies on the call was, really open about the fact that she said she felt she had put herself out there at times to push the organization, not knowing what the consequence was going to be for her. Was anybody going to have her back? Was anybody going to really listen to, hey, like, we need something different, and it looks like this. I know you're going down that path, but, and we were specifically talking about colleges and campus recruiting, and the fact that, if you're relying on the diversity of the campus that you visit, you better visit some different campuses. So let's talk about how we have those courageous conversations and how we amplify the voice, right? I think that's a really important part of the conversation.
Yeah, I know for Siemens, these courageous conversations have gone well beyond even my expectations of what, as an organization, we were kind of hyper focused, if you will, June, July, August, let's have those conversations. But even just yesterday, somebody's like, hey, we just had a courageous conversation. It went well. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, great. It's still going without even, a preempt, to say, have one. They're having them on their own. And what they're finding is that you can't just look at somebody and understand what they've been through. These conversations have really opened people up to share them as human beings and not just the role they play in the organization. And I think they're critical to building a better bond with your coworkers, building a better culture of understanding how people think and what they believe and what they're involved in as a person, and not just, like I said, the position they're filling within the organization. One of the key things to what you're saying, though, I think it's putting ownership on the leadership too. We provided leadership with coaching as well as a coach during the conversation. There's a facilitator guide and different tools that allow them to get comfortable. Because what I found is you got to meet people where they're at. And not everybody's ready to just dive into this conversation about race in the workplace. Let's back up a minute and just have a conversation, and we'll get to that. We also found that when we have a conversation about race, it opened it up about all different types of injustices, justices, things they wanted to see. I mean, the goal of our conversations was to come out with actions. What are we going to do differently? What are we going to keep doing that's working so that we are better going forward and that we can really make it even a better place to work? So I'll stop there and let others chime in, but courageous conversations are really important.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll say, I didn't reference earlier courageous conversations, but we at Deloitte had them as well. And, in all the different ways that our matrix comes together. So most people had an official chance or, to have more than one. And then like you said, Nichelle, and much like I think this call has so many participants, it's a topic people want to dive into. And I think that's been really important, and kind of getting into an understanding has been really important and useful, and listening is an important part of it. On a very tactical level, what can help if you're having tough conversations or you don't feel everyone in the group is ready for that? There's a few things that we've done across Deloitte, and this is more spontaneously happening and not necessarily, there was, like I said, there were the sanctioned ones, but there were others that spontaneously kind of happened. So for instance, you could have a guest speaker who's an author who is noted in the field in some way, and then have a facilitated discussion with that person and open it up for Q&A. That then opens up a way to maybe get people in the conversation or thinking about things that they hadn't before. We did that. We also did a Race in America series, or we're continuing a Race in America series, I should say, where noted people like Nicole Hannah-Jones and Ibram Kendi, who wrote How to Be an Anti-Racist, were speakers for us. And, in the virtual world, it's very easy to get quite a few of us engaged in listening and able to hear from the speaker across the country. And those also help inform the conversation and help inform people about different ways of thinking about the issues and wrestling with the issues. And I mentioned our allyship program earlier, and how that's a focus of our Black Action Council. And one of those things is say this, not that. How do you help people understand what to say? People don't intend to offend, but that's part of it too. Like, that's part of why people don't just dive into the conversations too. So we want to help facilitate that in ways that we can.
Yeah, people are like, what if I say the wrong thing,
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
we want you to say, at least, how are you doing? What can I do to help? At least start the conversation,
Right.
and then, provide, self-educate yourself, right, on it, so that you can kind of come to the table knowing something, right? Versus, well, teach me everything you know. It's like, oh my
Right.
goodness.
And that every group is not a monolith, right? So you
Right.
can't just take, all Nichelles.
Although we would love
Take
to.
all Black women and assume that we're, and so I think that's an important part of it too. And so there's something about just being authentic and entering into the conversation bravely and courageously that's important.
So I want to follow up on that one a little bit. Do you feel in this moment that there is a realization that one person can't speak on behalf of the entire group? I've been, lots of dialogue in the US right now, obviously, around how different groups voted and people saying, hey, like, by the way, this is a word that does not define everything that sits within that particular group, and so that's something that I had heard before, where it's like, it's really taxing to have to speak on behalf of the entire population, or for me to feel like I'm carrying the entire burden. So when you think about, what we need to do differently in terms of sponsoring and advocating and what, others in the organization can do if they want to truly be allies, talked about the importance of that. Maybe if the group can talk a little bit about, have you seen allies showing up differently? What should they, look to do? And what have you seen as, maybe some really great examples of how you feel other people have stepped up in the moment and helped shoulder that burden?
I have one comment that may be contrary a little bit, but one thing I've learned is I can't speak for anybody. And, as I'm learning, I sometimes can't even speak for myself, right? And so I think walking into a conversation saying, I don't know, I really don't know, I honestly don't know, is probably one of those first steps to take, even if I do try to read as much as I can. And so one thing I know that we're doing are these things called reverse mentoring. And so I care about mentoring folks, and I mentor folks, right? But, and I always learn whenever you mentor, but now we're being very purposeful, and I've set up a very purposeful reverse mentoring session, right? Where I can learn from somebody else and understand a different view. And the whole purpose of this reverse mentoring is for me to do nothing but show up, shut up, and learn, right? And I don't mean that like I'm talking about myself. I'm going to show up, shut up, and learn. But the concept, though, is really turning the concept around, which is, I can sponsor and I can mentor folks, but there's a lot I don't know. So for me to be better at that, I need to do a couple reverse mentoring sessions and set up some reverse mentoring relationships so I can learn. But I'm not sure directionally if that's where you're headed. So just I'll let somebody else answer.
I'm headed wherever this group wants to take us. I'm listening. I'm learning so much in this moment. I know everyone that's listening in is as well. So let's just keep talking.
I'll piggyback on what Lori said. And I think the reverse mentoring is a great idea. That's a great construct. And I think too, so, if I think about Deanna and some of the comments that she referenced from her session at her company, and I think about some of what I experienced personally, it can get weighty if you have to speak for, if there's a constant, I'll share a story. The week of George Floyd's funeral here in Houston, Texas, several interesting things intersected for me personally. Moved into our dream house. We saw George Floyd's casket go by because it's not that far from the neighborhood he was in. People reminded me that I probably knew him from high school, kind of. I mean, he played at another high school, played basketball at another high school. And I signed deed restrictions that said that Negroes were not allowed to live in the neighborhood. Like, all of that happened the same week for me. So the weightiness of someone else needing me to explain something to them that week, I could not deal with. However, I did genuinely appreciate that there were people who understood in that moment that either they understood that I needed space, or they wanted to reach out, just to be there. I appreciated that. Even if I wasn't in a place to kind of deal with it and living in boxes and having my own, having our family having our own moments. And so I use that example just because I don't think it's just any one time for the reverse mentoring or any one specific way that it has to happen or any of those things, but being that person that listens, that offers, that wants to understand. And that goes a lot of different directions. I mean, my daughter is hearing impaired, so I'm around people who are hearing impaired quite frequently. And that's that's a different thing, that I have to be the person that is not hearing. I'm a hearing person that has to then adjust and be an ally and make sure that people can read my lips and I speak differently and those things, because I want them included. And I think we all have to kind of think about it in that way.
I want to go back to your question about carrying the burden. I think I have a little different viewpoint than what we might have heard more popular of, oh, I'm so tired of talking about it. I think that from my view, me personally, I think everything happens for a reason. And I think the position that I'm in right now, my responsibility, right, is to educate and bring it to the forefront and listen to people, answer their questions. Whatever question you have, just ask me. We'll figure it out. I'm really not afraid of any of those tough questions that they have, because I can't expect people to know. I mean, it's really that's not the right way to go about it. I think you have to kind of meet people, like I said earlier, where they're at, and they may not be where you're at. You may know a whole bunch of things, and you just kind of assume that they know, and they just don't. And so it's important to say, hey, what questions do you have? Well, here's why this is it. Here's what that word really means. Here's why this is such a big deal for the African American community. Yes, African American versus Black. Here's that story. And then once you educate them, then it's about really saying, here's how you can be an ally, and here's how you can help in this journey to have justice for all, right? Equality for all, equity for all. And they're better educated going out to try to do that. And you kind of give them some actions to, you can't boil the ocean. So let's start in your little circle of influence and what you can do so that you, in your circle of influence, can be courageous. You can stand up when you hear something's wrong, and you know what's going on. Here, read this book. Here's this article. Here's this movie, whatever. And I think it's important that we don't tire of it, because we have to make sure that people have the right information. Otherwise, if you say, well, I'm too tired to talk about it, then other people, they kind of make up their own story, and it's misinformation. And then they start doing bad behavior even more. So I take a different stance when it comes to, well, I don't want to answer this question. Ask me. That's what I'm here for. So.
And I think what's really powerful about how each of you sort of are conversing here is it comes back to every situation is different. The conversation is two-way, right? Listening and understanding and being empathetic to what the other person may be in that moment going through. Like Nichelle, you were saying, there was a lot of other things happening in your life that were converging at the same moment. And that was not the moment for you to be the person that everybody else needed, and that awareness. I think the pandemic and us working, in this virtual environment, or a lot of us working in this virtual environment, like Lori was talking about, we don't have this separation anymore. Everyone gets to see our lives. They get to see whether our dogs, my dog likes to come on screen a lot too, and, I've had people with little kids, and I love it. I love seeing that blend of who we are as humans coming into, this experience. So, talk a little bit about, and you all have, as we've been going through, there's little snippets, but maybe share with the people that are listening, why is this so personal for you? Why is this something that you feel so strongly about? why were you eager to be on this panel today and share your experience and hopefully, be able to impact others around you?
I'll jump in. I think for me, as I said in the beginning too, I believe in the conversation. And it's similar to what Nichelle said. You can't not have the conversation, expect people to understand better. So I do believe in the conversation. And I believe that there are things that people are doing everywhere that could be shared that'll help all. I mean, just little incremental changes are one thing, but if we're sharing these big ideas and sharing what we're seeing, I also believe in that. And I believe there's learning in that. For me, it's personal. I mean, I'm a Black woman. I'm sure we know that now, but I think of intersectionality often. I think of how Black women are part of the conversation, but a different way. If you're not familiar with the term intersectionality, think of it as, it is the life experience plus, discrimination, everything, the good and the bad that goes with being kind of Black and with being a woman. There's other ways that you can have intersections, right? So the woman who coined the phrase spoke of a woman, and I think this industry can very much identify with this. A woman who worked in auto manufacturing a decade or so ago, who was excluded from operational jobs because she was a woman, and she was excluded from front office jobs because she was Black. And so there were, kind of white men were getting the operational jobs, and then white women were getting the some of the better kind of office jobs. We'll just describe it as office jobs for the plant. And her plight was kind of ignored because it wasn't recognized well. And I think I feel that in this moment, in some of the ways that the conversation is happening nationally around race at the moment. And so that's Deanna, when you say, why do you personally care about this? Are you passionate about this? I mean, that's why. I have a Black daughter who will one day be a Black woman. And I think all of this is important. And I think not just that there's lessons and interest and things to work out in my intersectionality, but everyone's intersectionality. And again, the conversation helps that. So that's my
Yeah, let me piggyback off of that. I think, as a society, we seem to focus on one attribute, I'm a woman of color, right? Okay, but I'm also professional, I'm education, I'm driven, I'm a caregiver, I can go on. And so that intersectionality of who I am, we really got to bring that more to the top, right? More transparency to that. So people can become to really understand people multidimensional and not just one dimensional and put us in a particular box. For me, I want to see more Black women, people of color, more brown women, all of that in leadership, right? And in order to do that, I got to pay it forward, right? I love mentoring people and bringing them forward. I mean, being successful is hard work. But if I could employ upon people, hey, here's what I did that made it work and made it easier, then maybe they can get there faster. And so I take it personally that it's my responsibility to pay it forward. It's my responsibility to bring people forward, to showcase people that are doing great work and sponsor people, and so that their struggle is a little easier than mine was. And so I really want to make sure and leave an impact, right? I'll move on to do other things at some point, but everything I do, I really want to leave a positive impact. So I'm in it. And I stay the course no matter what. I mean, we're right in the middle of this election. No matter what the outcome, there's some things we're going to have to address. But we have to stay the course, stay the journey, right? It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And so we can't give up just because of one or two things. We just got to keep going. So.
And I guess I'll add to both Nichelle's, because I think you triggered a thought process for me. Both of you did, so I appreciate it. And one, I've learned about intersectionality too, so I learned something new today, so thank you. But I've had for me, I'll tell you at a level that'll probably pull all of one together. We have these global scenarios. They're on the Shell webpage, and whether you take the Shell global scenarios or pick your company and look at their strategies that are all available on their web pages. For me, this comes down to something very fundamental, and it's that the continents have populations. The populations need energy. The energy mix is going to change over the next 10, 15, 20, 50 years. And I want my children and grandchildren to have energy. So that's how simple it is for me, even though that sounds very kind of, I don't know, futuristic, but it is kind of the core of what I believe, right? And so when I come to work, I'm thinking, okay, what can I do today? What do I have control of today to make that future better for somebody, and hopefully my children and grandchildren someday? And so that's probably the futuristic answer. Now, where that ties to diversity, equity, and inclusion is that I also believe that the energy, the finding, resourcing, developing the green energy and the energy transition is going to take all of us. It's going to take people that are LGBTQ+. It's going to take people of color. It's going to take women. It's going to take all of us to get us to a point where, from a sustainability standpoint, the energy sources match the energy consumption. So that's me in a very futuristic sense. And that drives me day in and day out. And like Nichelle, I have two college engineering students, right? Two of them, two boys. And then my daughter just applied to 2 or 3 universities for engineering. She wants to be a doctor someday, but to get her bachelor's, they're going to be engineer. She has to take an engineering curriculum, and or she wants to. And so I'm thinking to myself, I've got 3 children coming out into the workforce at some point, hopefully in the next 4 to 6 years, right? And I want the place, the workplace, to be a different place for them than the place I spent time in. And not that I mean, I've been very blessed and very fortunate, and I'm not complaining at all. But I do think that the world is changing, the companies are changing, the way we need to get work done is changing. I want them to be partnering and thinking about folks in India and folks in the US and folks overseas. And I need them to think differently. And the only way I can do that, since I've essentially can't influence them anymore, for me, the only way I can do that is to work very slowly, day in and day out, with the things I have control over in my current role and in sessions like these, to help bring these ideas out into conversation. And I do have stories. I love Nichelle's story, but I do think a lot of those conversations are just one person, one day at a time, one story at a time. And hopefully the world will change. And I want to be able to say, like you said, Nichelle, to say that I was some part of it at some point. So I hope that helps.
You know, Lori, just to piggyback, sorry.
So go ahead, Nichelle.
I was just saying, to piggyback off what you're saying, because you triggered something for me. When we think about what we're going to do going forward, you know, we kind of live in the moment, but we need to look ahead. And when you look at the generations that are in the workforce, right, we got 4 strong generations in the workforce that think differently, act differently, expect different things. We as a corporations need to kind of think that through, and how are we going to do things differently so that we can not only retain the workforce we have, but bring and attract workforce to our companies, right? And the diverse attributes that all those generations bring really can move us forward in this effort to innovate and stay on top of things. And so we really have to not get kind of complacent in this is how we always do it, and really kind of lift our heads up every now and then and go, okay, what are we going to do differently? And this 2020, man, is really just kind of pushed us back and go, okay, wait, whoa, what's going on? And we're doing things differently, remote working, right? Doing things in different industries. A whole bunch of things have really kind of come to light that we shouldn't go back to the way we used to do. We got to keep going with some of this stuff. So there's good things that come out of things.
Yeah, absolutely. So like the ladies on the panel, personally for me, just to share, I'm a mother as well. I had shared in our prep session that I have 6 children. 2 are mine biologically and 4 are stepchildren. And 5 of the 6 are female women and young women. And when my girls were little, I thought that the world would look a whole lot different by the time they hit the workforce. And what I've come to realize is it doesn't look a whole lot different. You know, when they entered the work environment, there was a lot of the same issues, same challenges, same conversations. And we hadn't really made as much progress as I thought we might in the 20 years. And someone gave me an opportunity at some point to step up to the table and have a voice at the table. And I think they thought that it would be a pretty silent voice, and they learned too late that it was not going to be a silent voice. And so they may have regretted that. Yeah. But I think it's you know, my responsibility to elevate the voices and bring other people up to the tables and to have the conversations. And like all of you were saying, I mean, we just need everyone in this moment. I mean, the challenges in front of us are so complex, so interconnected. We need every voice, we need every person, we need every potential background. There was a lot of, I'm kind of watching the chat a little bit as we're talking, and there's a ton of questions. One of the things that I think would be really great is for us to talk a little bit about, all of us work for big organizations who have a lot of resources around us, and sometimes it makes it easier when, you know, there are other people that within your company. So can you speak to either experiences that you've had or recommendations you would have for people listening to the call who might be in smaller organizations where there aren't the same frameworks, or you might be an individual, you might be an only in a company that you're in, and so how do you make change happen if that's the situation you're in?
Yeah, I can start. Start where you can, right? We started out with one employee resource group. We said, well, let's give it a try. And now 10 plus years later, we have 10 employee resource groups. But that wasn't because some didn't come and go and ebb and flow, and you have to meet the organization where you're at. So if you're a smaller organization, start small. Do one thing collectively that's for diversity, equity, inclusion. And then as you start small, people start getting, it's contagious, right? People, oh, I want to volunteer. I want to be a part of this, and it grows and grows. And at some point, you're going to get to this point where it's like, we need a little bit more structure, because we used to be grassroots, and you don't want to lose that, because the grassroots is great because people are passionate about it, and that passion really drives change. And so there's lots of free resources out there that people can use to kind of guide them as to where they should start, how to build an employee resource group, how to get leadership involved, having that dialogue with your leadership about the importance of it, no matter what your size is important. And then also getting that support structure, all those volunteers, and getting people involved in topics that they really want to work for. So, but bottom line is, don't try to do everything, right? You can't look at any of our companies and go, we're going to do all of that, this year. No, let's do one thing this year, and let's do it really, really well. You'll get people to get more involved, and then it snowballs from there.
I'd add on to that too. Prior to Deloitte, I was an only in a small company that had, I think we had about 35, 40 employees at the time. And so it was a pretty homogenous place, right? And I think what I would say is it was at the time, this was the younger version of me, the not long out of graduate school version of me, that sort of thing, that didn't always have probably the confidence to speak up or say or do maybe the bold thing. But as I think about it now, what I wish I would have done is kind of brought it to who I knew was an ally then, and kind of said, why don't we do something? We could do a book club. We could do, find some small idea to engage people, because, not to sound like a broken record, but the conversation's important. So how can I start having the conversation? Michelle and Lori have said the conversation's important. Maybe we all just believe in that. But I think, I kind of wish I had started having that conversation. And there are books and materials and resources, as Michelle mentioned, and I think those things can help facilitate the conversation. And inviting people, you know, I think also just inviting people into your life and open and being open to sharing. So it's hard to say when you don't have the resources of a, you know, a Shell, a Deloitte, a Baker Hughes, a Siemens, what you could do in your company. But I think you can start and kind of get, you know, get some allies together and see what you can build.
I had one thought that you just made me think of, and thank you for asking that question. So I found something that's really kind of useful, and I've been helping my kids with it. I've been asking folks, I'm like, when my kids were growing up, when I was growing up, I asked a lot of questions, right? Because I was extremely curious. And then when you get to a certain part of your career, you have to be the woman who knows the answers. And so you don't want to ask those questions because that shows your vulnerability. And probably in the last 5-10 years, I've turned into the person of, okay, I like to ask questions because the more I learn, the more I know, and then the more I know that I need to learn more, right? It's kind of that vicious cycle. And so one of the things I think the activities and the events that have happened over the last few months have done for me is really solidify the guidance that I even give my children, which is really be curious, right? Don't assume, be curious. And so if I could do me over again, right? Like you said, Nichelle, 2 decades ago, I probably would have taken that little voice in my head, you know, my mom sitting over my shoulder saying, curiosity killed the cat, curiosity killed the cat. You got to quit asking so many questions, right? I would have taken that voice out of my head. And I think if I'm in a company that's very, very small, if I had one piece of advice is, how do you create the ally? Well, you create an ally by learning about where they are and what are they thinking, and not that you pry continuously, but be curious, right? They might say something or do something, and instead of automatically assuming what they meant was X, just sit back and just hold myself back for a second and say, I wonder why that person said X, right? Clearly my mindset's here, and that was an unexpected reaction. And so instead of me saying, okay, well, clearly that, you know, I got to walk away, I need to stop and say, okay, I am missing something. I wonder why. And then turn that learner mindset on and say, hey, I just have to tell you, I'm trying to figure things out now. And the events recently have made me think differently and to realize I have blind spots. So now I need to understand kind of, you acted differently from what I said. Clearly I said something wrong. Can you teach me? Like I really want to learn. Tell me what I said or how I said it so I can know not to do that again, right? Or tell me what you're thinking just so I can think about and learn. And I think when you really just open up and say that, people actually then realize, okay, you're not trying to one up them, you're actually really trying to learn. And that's my only advice for somebody in a small company or early in a career, which is just, you know, I wish I could undo right that 20 years ago, but I can't. So all I can do now is say, maybe if that's one thing I would do over, I turn on my learner mindset, be more curious, and then ask the question. Because I think sometimes we're curious, but we don't say anything. And then the outward expectation or outcome is that the person doesn't know that we're curious, right? So that's just a thought process I had. Thanks, Nichelle, for bringing that out.
Yeah, I have to, in this moment, I'm going to give a thank you. I was reflecting a couple of years ago, I sat in a room and I had someone from my team when I was at Marathon Oil, Cher Hammond, if I don't know that she's listening, but and she allowed me to be a learner in a room of individuals that was incredibly powerful and totally changed my perspective on how as a leader I needed to show up. And I cannot, you know, I mean, the tenacity of the people who are willing to teach and the patience for those of us who need to learn. I just, you know, on behalf of myself and anyone else, like, thank you for that, because you know, without that, you know, we're not getting anywhere. But it has to be hard, you know, and I grew up in Canada, so it's a different experience. And there were some people on on the chat that we're talking about, if you work in an international company like all of us do, you know, the race conversation in the US is unique. And so how do you have that conversation in a global context? So I'm going to ask that question. And then also there was something around, how do you have that conversation when no one wants the conversation to happen? You know, so there's some places in the US where, you know, manufacturing plants, you know, locations where there is not a lot of appetite to start a conversation or have a conversation. So what would you suggest in either of those two situations?
I can talk a little bit about, in my global ER&I, DEI, lots of acronyms there, my global energy, diversity, equity, inclusion role. One of the things that we're trying to do is kind of put together a framework such that all of our, in our lingo, it's member firms, but basically let's just say different countries and regions can figure out what they're going to do, but with the goal of reflecting what their society looks like. So that's kind of what we've set as a bit of an umbrella, so that there are honest conversations there. I mean, Deanna, it's a great point about, you know, the US and race, but it's even around how people feel about disclosing their, I don't want to say otherness because that sounds so negative, but disclosing the groups that they identify with. And many places in the world, you don't even have to do that. So then trying to identify diversity or trying to exhibit diversity becomes that much more of a challenge. But so that's what we're trying to do, is kind of set up a framework, and also think about how it is that, you know, English is the primary language of our firm, but then that also creates a situation. So, you know, think about English for people for whom English is a second language for. Think about people and culturally how meetings, habits, ways of working are different around the world, and making sure that we put that into play and do some, and then, you know, do some of what we know works. Have training on it. Talk about how you need to be cognizant of those things across, you know, within your country and across dealing with our global firm. So just a few ideas there.
Yeah, I think what we've done is we've kind of established this foundation across the Siemens family, no matter where you are in the world. And then from there, you can feed off of that to make the unique attributes of your country fit for, you know, your laws and different things that you have to follow and different initiatives that you may have. We may do something here that we may not do in Germany or the UK or in Asia somewhere, right? So it's important that you have at least the foundation understanding of, we all stand for this, you know, mission, vision. And then from there, here's what we're going to do in our unique locations and our unique, I guess, traditions, right? In order to all foster towards reaching that North Star, right? I think we would be, to your other part of your question while I'm speaking, it's to be naive to say that everybody's on board would be wrong, right? We know that not everybody's on board, and you may not get 100% across any organization on board, but you got to keep at it. Like I said, it's a long journey that we're on, and if you just keep going and have those conversations, we keep coming back to that. But it's really about communication, dialogue, education. And every time I walk up to somebody or talk to somebody virtually, and they're like, I don't know why we're even talking about this. What are we doing? You know, I want to understand it from their perspective. Why do you say it like that? What is it that you have in your mind and how you're thinking about it? Or what context, what viewpoint are you coming from, so that I can better understand, and then I can provide whatever it's needed in order to give it from the viewpoint of why we're promoting racial justice, why we're promoting diversity, equity, inclusion. So those that come up and say, well, what are we doing? I want to tie it back to why it's important for business, why it's important for just human being and belonging. All of that comes into context. And hopefully, even if they may not get it in that moment, I've left them with something to think about Right. I've had several come back and go, hey, I was thinking about what you said, you know, and so, which is good, because then I said, okay, good. One at a time, one at a time. So I'll stop there.
Lori, was there anything you wanted to add from a global context? Anything that you think Shell does uniquely that others could benefit from understanding?
Yeah, I think the only thing I was just going to add is for anybody on this call who are working in a global company, if you sit back for a second, or at least if I sit back for a second and think about it, whenever you have a very complex problem to solve, whatever it is, you're going to get to a better answer, and potentially a better answer quicker, with the diversity of thought, right? So for me, what we're trying to do, and what probably all of our companies are doing, is we're trying to get to the point where the diversity of thought, and then every country might have a different aspect that provides a barrier or a cultural barrier that is specific to that location. But our end in mind is really to add value, right? Add value to the company, protect the front line, in our case, the offshore and the onshore operators and maintenance folks, and get the problem solved with the best part of everybody possible. And the only way that you can get everybody to bring their whole self to work, no matter what country they're in, is if they feel like they're going to be included, and that their thought, even if it's a crazy idea, is actually, if they really believe in it, it's brought to the table, and there's a way they feel safe to bring those other ideas or opposing ideas to the table. And so I think for me, it's really around, what are we here for? We're here to deliver value safely. Some jobs are to protect the front line, some jobs are to support the front line, but it's all about the front line that's adding the value, right? And so I think at a higher level, or at least at a level that brings us all together, it's all about making sure that we're using the best of everybody. And I think that's probably one example that we're doing in Shell. I do see a question, though, on the chat. For folks that need some really tactical, I think Michelle used a couple examples. You can absolutely go to WEN. So there are so many WEN events, Women Energy Network events like this. But if you need other activities to bring into your company, small or large, Catalyst has a whole stack of activities. They have data, they have activities, they have facilitator guide notes, they have white papers. I mean, that's a resource that I know we leverage a lot. And so I just wanted to get that practical thought on into this room. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. So there was a question around, Nichelle brought up earlier, the say this, not that, and whether there was any advice on that one, around where you could find resources relative to that. And or I would sort of say, is it I should ask before? It's okay. How do we get corrected? What's the right way? I mean, you were very clear, when you introduced yourself and you said, I'm a Black woman. So, now I know, if I'm introducing Nichelle, I'm going to say, this is Nichelle. She's a Black woman, who has a hearing impaired child, which also there was a question in there about, sort of how do you help other diverse groups? How do we use the platform to really raise the voice and amplify for everyone? How do we change the landscape? So if there's any commentary on either of those, I think that would be beneficial for the group as well.
Since I feel like you called me out a little bit.
Sorry, I did not mean to.
No, not an issue at all. I want to take the latter question, certainly, because I have a passion around differently abled people with learning differences and the like. I'm actually on the board of an organization here in Houston that helps people with hearing loss. And it's interesting because I think we often think that our intersectionality or our consciousness kind of overlaps about these things, but it doesn't just happen. It it is a thing that I've been on a learning journey about for 12 years now. I can think of, and again, something I think this group would recognize, you know, I'm on the board for this organization. We start looking for a CEO. I am, you know, it's me and there's, you know, 5 white guys. And everyone, think about who you know, and we're gonna come up with the next CEO. And I thought to myself, here we are in this organization that is focused on helping people be included and communicate more broadly and learn and grow and be productive citizens and part of the workplace and all of those wonderful things. But we just did something that's not that, right? And saying, well, who do we know? How are we gonna? And I think, so it goes back to the intentionality of it all. Like, either you're going to deliberately say, we're gonna look broadly, because we, as Lori said, and Nichelle said, and we've all said, you know, you've gotta find the best people, you've gotta find different thinkers, you've gotta find people who are gonna communicate and really have a passion for this community we're working with. Or you're not, or you're going to kind of fall back on what perpetuates itself, which is not doing that. Just think of who we know. So that's one thing, but I think of then also, and not to knock this organization, it's a fantastic organization, and we did end up searching broadly, and I love our new CEO, and I love the fact that we provide services regardless of people's ability to pay. So there's all these wonderful things. But I think that is the duality of it all. So I think we all have to stop and step back and say, am I really being inclusive in this moment? Am I really thinking about how this could impact someone else? Or would everyone be able to actually participate meaningfully in this situation? Just my 2 cents.
Can you repeat your first question?
It was say this instead of this. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Where might someone go to find resources that would give them a better insight into how to use the right
I have something.
words?
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead,
I
Michelle.
found this book that says, what if I say the wrong thing? And it says, here's the things we say and here's what we say. Verna Myers puts it out. It's really a great little easy read book that you can just reference to. There's plenty of things out on the internet, but you know what we did? We did a little workshop called Building a Courageous You, because what we were trying to do is not really have people just focus on what's Siemens going to do, you know, always looking to the CEO or to their leader, but it's what can you do as an individual, really? And we focused on how to be courageous as an individual, how to take action as an individual, and also the third one's how to be authentic. Right? Because we need everybody to show up and be authentic. And in that series, we were teaching people on, you know, if silence is consent, then what do you say when you hear something that was wrong? And it was simple things like, oh, what did you mean by that? Or you hold up and you say, oh, yellow card, you know, or you say, ouch, you know, and then that kind of puts people back, kind of like, oh, well, wait, what did I say wrong? Or what term did I use wrong? Or something like that. And if you do that on a regular basis, people start expecting and kind of checking themselves before they just speak, right? And then we left people with, you know, think twice, speak once. So think about what you're going to say before you say it. And so there, maybe even, I don't know if you're sending out resources afterwards, but maybe we can certainly kind of collectively give you some links to some different things.
I know I would like the link, so I hope you send it out.
Okay, Lori.
I was gonna add to that though, and this is just kind of thinking off the top of my head, so I'm amazed this is actually recorded. But one thing I've been thinking through is I've been trying to read, right? I have a reverse mentoring relationship with somebody who's trying to help me learn, and he gave me this material to read, and it's one where I'm looking through it and I'm going, wow, I didn't know that. And so as I read through it, I have to think to myself, I can't assume, right? Even though it says in this material, say this, don't say this, say this, don't say this, or think about this, or don't think about that. What I've also been trying to do in my head is to also know that that is just one material's view, right? And so Like if somebody says, oh, she's Asian or she's Oriental, I think to myself, right now I'm numb to it. I've been the way I am for I'm not going to say my age on recording, but for a very long time. And so I'm numb to it. But so I am trying to think through, there's a balance between the material I read and the material that I learn. And then just really just saying, hey, I don't know if I should say Black or African American or for Asian, Japanese American, Hawaiian American, Asian, Oriental. How do I say it? What do I say? And so part of me is just really taking that as information and trying to make sure I take a conscious, purposeful thought process. And if I feel uncomfortable, just ask the question and say, look, I just have to tell you, I just have to ask, is this the right way to say it? And it's really uncomfortable, right? It's not a comfortable feeling. And I think Nichelle said it in one of our earlier sessions, but over the last 3 to 5 months, I've gotten really comfortable with feeling uncomfortable, right? This whole conversation we're having is kind of uncomfortable. And I think that's okay, right? That's where we are headed. And that is a good thing because it's stretching me to grow. It's stretching us to grow. Mm-hmm. So I just wanted to put that in the room, that no matter what material that I'm trying to read, I'm trying to learn, I'm also knowing that whoever I'm talking to may not have written that material, right? And so sometimes I just have to ask. I also want to put one more caveat into the room. I also don't want folks worried about what they say to me, right? And so assuming that they don't know that, sometimes I just tell people, say whatever's on your mind. It's not going to hurt my feelings. I'm trying to learn. And so I think some of what we're doing right now, folks are saying, oh, Lori's up there talking about that. Now I got to be careful what I say to her. And so I'm also trying to say to folks, say whatever you want, because this is all about me learning right now. And I won't be offended. I need to learn.
Yep, I agree totally with that, Lori. You know, I when I took on this position, I was like, okay, I got to be in learning mode too, right? I don't know everything. I'm very resourceful, but I need to learn. So my go-to phrase when somebody says something that I know nothing, that's way out of my realm, I'm like, okay, hold on, teaching moment, you know, teach me something. What are you saying? Tell me a little more about it, because I don't know much about that piece, you know, and people kind of get comfortable, right? And so I like the questions to come, you know, give me a challenge, right? And that drives me to go, ooh, let's figure that out, you know, let's do it together. Let's accomplish something. Let's make a change. So I'm right with you, Laura.
Doesn't the question always feel, well, I mean, it certainly could feel bad, but I think the question feels good, right? It feels like someone's genuinely interested, or they care, or they don't want to offend. So
they're trying.
Exactly, they're trying. So I don't think I'm definitely of the same mindset. Like, let's have the discussion. Oh, and you might not get the same answer if you survey, like, you know, back to the monolithic view of any group, you might not get the same answer, people's varied experiences and preferences. But I think it's generally that you're interested and you're trying not to be offensive. So I think that's a positive thing for sure.
The openness and authenticity and honesty of the conversation here is absolutely incredible. And I'm kind of watching some of the comments. That isn't always, so this is going to be my last question, and then I think we have to unfortunately turn it back over, but it's okay. We've already talked about, we're going to come up with a podcast. I'll have these 3 ladies on the regular. We'll have guest moderators too, you know, just to mix things up. But I think that would be a great way to use this as a kickoff to continued conversations. But how do we encourage that authenticity, that honesty, the conversation when there's different levels of power in the room? So that will be my last one for today. And whoever wants to kick it off, go ahead.
Well, the other 2 ladies are on mute, so I guess that's me. I kind of looked first.
You're like looking for the help, and it's like, no, go.
This is a hard one. Come on. It's a great question, and I think, you know, there's a woman by the name of Ashley Rosette, who's a professor at Duke University, and I was listening to a session that she did. There's actually research that shows that minorities who speak up and talk about these issues are perceived as being lower performers. It can be a scary, dangerous thing to do for your career, to be the person who owns this conversation at your company. And I'm so waiting for Lori and Michelle to chime in and give some answers too. But when I think about that, I think I go to safe places first. I go to safe leaders first, allies, and have, you know, the conversation and understand and get some coaching and perspective. But I think that's, I think that's tough, because you don't know how everyone's going to take it. And you don't know, I think most of us have said our leadership is wildly supportive, right? But that doesn't trickle down to every single leader across your company too. So yeah, Michelle, Lori,
Okay.
everybody listen.
I'll piggyback off of
You're
that.
off mute.
I'm going to go back to courageous conversations, right? There was, you know, overall, it was like, as I told the organization, hey, we got to have these courageous conversations. We got to do what? You know? And, but the way that we approached it, and knowing again that not everybody was on board, I think it has really had the shift in the mindset. And not to say when everybody got on the call, depending on what size the call was, that there weren't people that were just dead silence. But what was confirming was that even though you're in this mix within the group and not everybody's talking, some people are manipulating, taking over the conversation. What happened in one conversation, just to share this quick story, was that I talked to the manager afterwards. We're on this conversation with her team, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, oh man, half the people didn't talk, blah, blah, blah. And she says, but I went out to, that was before, they were in this plant location. She went out to the smoke area and they were still talking. The people that were quiet on the phone were positively talking out together about the importance of it and what they learned from it. So just because people are silent doesn't mean that they're not learning or listening. And because you have a mix of people up front, just establish, hey, it's not about titles right now, right? All we're doing is having a conversation. We're all in it for this common goal, this common mission, this common vision for the organization. We all work here. We all collectively build the culture, the climate within a particular organization. Let's just have an open dialogue, right? No questions off limits, and let's make sure that everybody has a chance to be heard,
I'll add on then. So, and I'm going to honestly say I'm so thankful and blessed that I work for a company where our CEO and all the levels of the organization have honestly and deeply kind of embraced the conversations that we're having today, and they're holding them themselves, right? They're having small group dialogues and large dialogues and town halls and such. And so I'm just extremely blessed for that. But the thing that I've learned, especially through this pandemic, is conversations are happening differently. Okay. So in the past, prior to pandemic, a conversation is get on to somebody's calendar and book a meeting to show up, or Skype, or a very formal, let's have a formal connect. And, it could be months before you can get into the right folks' calendars to have the right conversation, whatever that conversation may be. And what I've learned actually is the way we have conversations now, they're completely different than they were prior to the pandemic, right? I just got pinged by somebody on Skype that I haven't heard from in probably 5 years. And literally, and I'm like, okay, let's have this conversation, right? And so conversations happen differently. They happen through chats, Skypes, emails. Not that we're all going to go back to the old way of working always, but the concept, I think, around having conversations, influencing and listening to what folks' thoughts are, because it's happening differently, I think the one thing I'm teaching my children and I'm trying to learn myself is, how do I day in and day out do the one little thing that changes a view or that learns from another view? How do I do that in very small chunks, one person, one conversation at a time? And sometimes I'm trying to change a view, sometimes I'm trying to learn, and maybe it's my view that needs to change. But it's a ping here. Somebody just sent me a Teams chat. It's okay, how can we make that decision on X selection together? How do we take the person out of it? How do we create maybe a point system and look at the job requirements and look at the candidate requirements and honestly just get rid of all the names for a second? And let's just have this conversation off of a point decision matrix. Forget about the names. Let's just look at what they brought to the table. And so how do I do little things day in and day out and get small little systems in place so that at some point in time, we've changed more than what we could have changed by ourselves, right? And so I think the conversations are different. I think they're not just different. I think that there are avenues to listen and learn. And to be honest, I think as leaders in our own organizations, we need to figure out how to tap into those avenues and change or learn differently. I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a fabulous conversation, ladies. I'll maybe chime in on the last one and say, I know we're having conversations across the entirety of Baker Hughes. I'm going to put, I always am telling people, you can always like knock on my virtual door in Teams and on LinkedIn. I would love to have a conversation. I know our CEO loves to have the conversations. And you would actually be surprised, I think, at how many senior leaders would welcome the discussion, and people don't have the courage to actually send them an email and say, hey, do you have time for a 5-minute chat? I would just like to share something with you. I think right now there's a lot of organizations, especially, where the leaders are listening. So I'm going to hand it back over to Cara. Thank you so much, ladies. This was a pleasure. And go on all day. I could do this all day.
This is great. Thank you.
Yes, I want to echo everybody. Thank you so much to Deanna, Nichelle, and Lori. And it was a wonderful event. I just have a few closing things here, just a few announcements. The first one is that there is a reminder. We are actively looking for a National Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion on WEN. We are in the process of receiving nominations. So if you know somebody or if you yourself are interested, please complete the form on or before December 3rd. With that also being said, please remember, if you could go to the next slide, all of our events, all of our programming for not just WEN National, but all of our chapters are always on the womensenergynetwork.org website. If you go to the next slide, this is just a bunch of examples of all of the different programs that are coming up in the next 3 weeks. So remember, we're all working from home. We are all going virtual on events. You can attend not just Houston's events or Chicago's events. You can attend them all. So please go ahead and sign up. We've got some great things coming up, and continue to look always on the WEN website for the most recent activities. And finally, I want to let everyone know that we have actually moved the date for the 2021 conference to 2022. Obviously, with everything that's going on in the world, we want the WEN members to be safe. So this announcement came out yesterday. We are moving to the WEN 2022 dates of April 3rd through 5th at the same location at the Omni Fort Worth, Texas. So please make sure to save the date, number one, in your calendars. Note the change, and we want to say thank you to everyone who put so much work and effort into planning for the 2021 conference, and we look forward to continuing that planning for 2022. So with that being said, I'm going to close it out. Please remember to stay connected. We are extremely active on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. And of course, our website is always there. So everyone, please be safe, continue this conversation, be courageous, and connect with others. Thank you.